violation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the live stream. March 5th, 2026. Thanks for joining me today. So, don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Well, what's up today in the news? Well, while the right is apoplectic about Israel supposedly convincing Trump to invade Iran, wiser heads see the long game against China and Russia and the BRICS alliance. Also, we'll be talking about the primary fallout for people like Jasmine Crockett and her successor. We'll be talking about these stories and more coming up right now. All right, we're going to start with the Associated Press here. Senate Republicans vote down legislation to halt Iran war in Congress. Congress's first vote on the conflict. So the Senate backed Trump here, not wanting, again, the detractors of armed engagement, whether it is in Venezuela or in Iran. Congress is trying to get the power back from the president, and the executive over the years and over really most of American history has sided with the idea that the executive can launch military acts on his own as long as those military strikes are not prolonged. And so the law is kind of gray in the sense of, is it 30, is it 90 days? It's weeks, certainly. And Congress is going to go ahead and probably side with the president anyway, as far as these war power acts go. Let's get into some news today about the conflict, Operation Epic Fury. Stealth bombers landing at UK bases in days after Trump pressures Starmer. This is from Fox News. B-2 bombers will operate from RAF Fairford and Diego Garcia. Diego Garcia isn't a UK base, it's an American base anyway, as Washington intensifies campaign against Iranian ballistic missile sites. They have achieved air superiority here, and that's the main thing we have to understand. This is going to be a prolonged air campaign for some time, and specifically having a world impact against China and Russia, as I stated in the beginning this morning. And so it's not just about doing the bidding of Israel. Israel certainly benefits, but actually the decision to go ahead with this campaign, Operation Epic Fury, is more about how it's going to benefit the United States, America first, right? So it's an opportunity because Israel said they're going to go after the leadership of Iran because they were all gathering together to answer or to convene regarding the military buildup by the United States. That's what probably triggered Israel to do what it was going to do, and then triggered Operation Epic Fury. Also, getting back to the story, citing unnamed senior Western officials, the Telegraph reported Wednesday that air bases at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean and RAF Fairford and Gloucestershire are being readied for the arrival of B-2 Spirit stealth bombers. The $2 billion strategic bomber is also known as the world's most expensive aircraft and really most efficient. Thanks again for joining me today. Sorry about the late start. I was up a little late, but getting up 15 minutes late translates into getting the live stream started late as well. But I appreciate you joining me today. I'm not quite prepared, so stick with me just for a second. I hope everybody had a wonderful evening last night. On a personal note, I went on a date night with my wife, and that was enjoyable. Once in a while to get out and to and I keep having the same snafu happen with Rumble Studio that I'm also trying to work out here. But thanks again for joining me. Let's get on with the headlines here. Over 40 headlines to get through here. I had some clips from Comer and Nancy Mace's grilling of Tim Walsh, which I found pretty amusing, but I'm going to forego that for the sake of time. It's already 20 after, and I want to try to wrap things up as close to 11 as I can. Let's move on with the headlines, though. More breaking news around Operation Epic Fury that was alluded to yesterday, but let's get to the headline here from the New York Post. Kurds launch ground offensive against Iranian regime, according to reports. You have to remember, according to reports, this part. Thousands of Kurdish fighters reportedly crossed Iraq's border with Iran on Wednesday as part of a ground offensive against the Iranian regime. U.S. and Israeli officials confirmed the military campaign, according to Fox News. Now, here's the thing with this. As I mentioned, since Operation Epic Fury began, that propaganda is rife. So we're going to have I'm just a little aggravated here because my stream is hanging up, and I purchased a new computer here to make sure that this crap doesn't happen, and it happens anyway. There is tons of propaganda out here, and most of the propaganda is meant to fool the enemy, which is Iran in this case. So there was talk yesterday about this using Kurdish ground forces as boots on the ground in Iran to help pry out the regime, to get the regime to capitulate. We don't know if this is some sort of propaganda feign or not. So, moving on with the story, though, not a single Iraqi Kurd has crossed the border. This is patently false. Aziz Ahmed, the deputy chief of staff to the prime minister of Kurdistan, wrote on X. Now, he may be deciding whether or not to become public with this information because maybe he's afeared that the Iranians will start launching missiles at Iraqi Kurdistan. Now, Kurdistan is not a country. It wants to be a country. There is this ethnic enclave there in parts of Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, and Syria I think they should have a country. I think if the powers that be could carve one out for them, certainly out of the northern Iran. But Turkey doesn't want to have anything to do with that. Article goes on to say Iranian Kurdish groups operating from territory along the Iraq-Iran border are involved in the ground incursion, the Jerusalem Post reported. The group maintained thousands of fighters, according to the outlet, and has been preparing in recent days for a ground offensive aimed at pressuring Iranian security forces and dispersing them across the country. The incursion may have actually started earlier this week. So that this might have been lined up before the air campaign even began. All right. Moving on with the headlines here. Yeah, I'm trying to work out these issues in my feed here because it's hanging up. PJ Media, U.S. Space Force uses laser weapons to knock down Iranian missiles. This is according to PJ Media, by the way. They don't really source their information here. Directed energy weapons have moved beyond research program and test ranges. They're now stopping real missiles in combat. So says PJ Media. The U.S. Space Force systems helped intercept Iranian ballistic missiles during the operation. The systems rely on high-energy laser technology designed to damage or destroy incoming missiles before they reach their target. Operation Epic Fury involved multiple branches of the United States military. The Space Force contributed missile tracking and directed energy capabilities designed to counter Iranian launches, launch activity. Epic Fury represented a real-world test environment. Iranian forces launched ballistic missiles during the conflict. Space-based detection systems quickly identified the launches, and defense systems then engaged the missiles before they could reach populated areas or military installations. Then moving on to article number 5 here, Reuters, Iran war live. Israel orders southern Beirut evacuation. Azerbaijan hit by drones. So Azerbaijan has now been hit by Iranian drones. They vowed to retaliate. And Israel is attacking Hezbollah in Beirut and southern Lebanon. Now, the point of this whole operation, people, and that's all I hear on the internet this morning, is we're going to war for Bibi, for Benjamin Netanyahu and Israel. They forced us into this, et cetera, et cetera. When if you put it in context, what we're seeing here now is something completely different, which is that Donald Trump, since his inauguration, actually in his first term, he has no love, certainly, for the Iranian regime. Let's just put that. And so every chance he got to attack their assets, etc., I mean, he would subscribe to do it. However, even in his second term, the foreign policy has become even more strategic in the sense of whether it's tariffs, and this is why the Supreme Court ruling was wrong. The tariffs and the military operation are meant to put China back from challenging the hegemonic power of the United States. And people say, oh, you're just an imperialist. Look, the United States is still the freest country on the globe. And what we used to do is spread democracy because what we were actually doing is spreading freedom. There wouldn't be a UN contract on human rights or whatever they call it. There wouldn't have global human rights at all if it wasn't for constitutional rights in the United States. I mean, you could talk about Britain with the Magna Carta and everything, but they've seemed to be backtracking on their original push for individual liberties for people. But what we're really talking about here is what's stated in the National Review headline, why Operation Epic Fury is catastrophic for Xi Jinping. Jinping, the leader of the Communist Party of China. The men in Zhongshanhai do not rattle easily. Decades of patient statecraft, foreign policy built on studied ambiguity, and an economy engineered to absorb external shocks have granted Beijing's leadership a remarkable tolerance for turbulence. Operation Epic Fury, the U.S.-Israeli military campaign now dismantling Iran's military architecture, has produced something unusual in the corridors of Chinese power: visible confusion. This is one of the strengths of Donald Trump, is his unpredictability, because what we see is Donald Trump, the Chinese always looked at the democratic nations of lacking the ability to strike at a moment's notice because of the need for deliberation. Well, President Donald Trump, he moved the carrier groups in there, and people say that he didn't, but the State Department certainly issued alerts for people working abroad and in the Middle East well before the operation began. And everybody thought that was a feign, but then he committed to the attacks in coordination with Israel, true. But that surprise when China assumed that there'd be a lot more deliberation, a lot more hand-wringing, and a lot more pause, as in administrations past, you didn't get that with Donald Trump. And it was surprising because of Donald Trump's political promises about not getting involved in any foreign entanglements. But he certainly has done that. Here, how entangled we're going to get is left to be seen. More from Just the News. War with Iran disrupts Chinese oil supply strategies in the Middle East. The U.S. allies continue strikes on Iran. Chinese leaders watch from Beijing as the leadership of their second major partner this year is being decapitated under military onslaught. When Donald Trump took office for the second time last year, he faced a more closely aligned axis of adversaries that during the 4-year Biden administration had been clustered closer together around China and Russia. Iran is a central pillar of that axis, which I explained just recently, supplying war material and cheap oil exports in exchange for investments, diplomatic cover, and help avoiding U.S. sanctions. China for years extended both physical and political capital on the Iranian regime, including by supporting its ballistic missile program through dual-use exports, boosting its terrorist proxies to distract the United States, and to help it evade U.S. oil sanctions through shadow fleet operations. China is also a vital component lying at the geographical center of Beijing's plans to build connections by land and sea to markets in the Middle East and Europe. When the conflict broke out, China relied heavily on Iranian crude oil. Exports data showing that China bought more than 80% of Iran's shipped oil in 2025. Even under the U.S. sanctions regime, it imported about 1.38 million barrels a day per day on average last year, representing 13.4 of its total oil exports by sea. Reuters reported last month because China is one of Iran's only customers, it often sold the oil at below market prices, which was a boon for Beijing. None of this is surprising to the Trump administration, but it's surprising to people out there, the so-called pundits who are deciding whether or not this was a good move against Iran. It's a moot point now. It happened. So what we're trying to do here is leverage the foreign diplomacy out of what is happening. And this is not strictly aimed at BRICS, China, etc., and that Trump has been using his foreign diplomacy to sideline China as a player. Specifically because we never should have done this from the beginning. let China into the World Trade Organization, et cetera, et cetera. We built communist China to the power they are today. Moving on to the next headline, Wall Street Journal, story number 8, China signals new era of slower economic growth. Beijing sets historical low growth target of 4.5 to 5%. That's basically in par with where we are. China historically has grown at 10, 20, and at some point even 30%. And their growth would push China past the United States as an economic power. And certainly China was not going to be restrained by the stupid climate things that they were saddling the West with, particularly in America. More news on this front. Zero hedge, China halts diesel gasoline exports as paralyzed Hormuz risks energy shock. Less than 1 week into the Operation Epic Fury, Beijing has ordered its top refiners to halt gasoline and diesel exports as the Strait of Hormuz remains paralyzed on Thursday morning. The move exposes how China is one of the biggest losers in a prolonged Hormuz shutdown, with Beijing appearing to brace for an oil shock. And that's why they're not exporting any more gasoline, diesel to places like North Korea, et cetera, some of their more local trading partners. Specifically because they're hurting. This was a surprise. Maduro was a surprise. This was a surprise. It shouldn't have been a surprise after what happened in Venezuela, but it is certainly a surprise. And we're going to figure out what's happening here with I hate bringing it up, but it's like it never originally happened and now it's happening, so deal with it. Just the news. U.S. military strength improved but not ready for long-term war with China, according to a report. U.S. military strength has improved, but it's insufficient for a major war with China without further funding, according to a new report from the Heritage Foundation. Okay, so given this, you understand how if you put China in a box with a war with Iran, that you're able to kick the can down the road with any military conflict with China. The Heritage Foundation says the munition shortage and defense funding is not enough to increase production and sustain a war efforts if long-term war breaks out. And nobody wants war with China. Nobody wants a world war. And that was with the real risks here were not many from Iran. What they were was creating a world war. So if we struck Iran and Russia and China immediately came into the conflict on the side of Iran, that's what we were trying to avoid at all costs. And that's why the administration and even some of the media outlets weren't talking about China in the very first days of the conflict, because they didn't want to make it seem like America was doing this to put China in a box, which it obviously is. More updates from the war, the Associated Press. Iran attacks Israel and U.S. bases as Israel strikes Hezbollah-linked targets in Lebanon. Missiles, drone, and airstrikes batter Iran in the wider region. And if you could just look at this graph here, there's a graphic about where all the strikes are. And it looks like northern Iran, on the strikes yesterday, were clustered in northern Iran along the Iraq border, where the Kurds are. So it looks like indeed they are setting the stage to allow the Kurds to come into the conflict. And they've been reliable military partners in Syria and in Iraq for years. Although United States often is committed to double dealing when it comes to the Kurds. I have to figure out why the stream is freezing. It might be my camera. Didn't happen in the beginning, just happens now. It's like I'm constantly plagued with technical problems Why it just keeps happening and happening and happening, who knows? Who knows? Story goes on to say Iranian state television aired a message Thursday from the Ayatollah in Iran calling for the shedding of blood from Israelis and U.S. President Donald Trump. The message represented a rare call of violence from an Ayatollah. And then we're going to move on to zero hedge here. Futures jump. Futures jump on reports about Iran's willingness to give up Iranian stockpile. U.S. futures jump after Bloomberg News reported that Iran had previously signaled a willingness to surrender its highly enriched uranium stockpiles in U.S. stakes negotiations just before the U.S. launched Operation Epic Fury. Although the Bloomberg story relates to last week's news, the U.S.-Iran developments, the market is extremely sensitive to headlines, even old ones, and that was enough to send the S&P 500 E-mini futures surging, erasing earlier losses, and now flat. NASDAQ futures are also a little changed. And the reasoning behind this obviously is, as they said, is that the market reacts to old news, new news. It doesn't matter what the headlines are, what they signify. What we do have going on here is what the Iranians said was, we have enough stockpiled uranium to build 11 nuclear bombs. And when the Israelis and the Americans heard that, they're like, okay, that's it. But what they said that, now it's revealed they said that in the context of we're willing to give it up. So whether they actually had it or not is left to be seen. We don't really know. They might have just been bluffing and say, we're willing to give up this enriched uranium that we have for 11 atomic bombs in, for certain concessions. Is the result of our practical achievements, and we are ready to get rid of it, provided we get something good in return, they said. Iran has agreed to give up its stockpile of enriched material, zero accumulation, and allow full verification by the IAEA of its nuclear program, according to the U.S.-Iran talks mediator, Oman's foreign minister, Bada al-Busadi. The Iranian side also seems to be confirming its willingness to make this significant concession, also to stave off a massive U.S. attack, given the immense buildup of Pentagon assets in the region. So this is all from last week. Just the news. Iranian official behind Trump assassination plot killed as U.S. prosecutes would-be assassin in New York. Israeli media outlets reported on Wednesday that Rahman Moqam, described as the head of the IRGC Special Operations Division, was the Iranian official who had been killed. The exact name of the IRGC official had not been officially confirmed by the U.S. military. The Justice Department filed charges against Pakistani national Asif Merchant and against Afghan national Farhad Shakiri for their alleged role in the Iranian-backed assassination plots. The former defendant's somewhat murky plot seemingly targeted Trump, while the latter defendant's apparently more sophisticated plot was also aimed at the president. Yeah. I mean, the Iranians, their skill at operating assets abroad, I think, is limited. So I wouldn't expect a sophisticated attack of sleeper cells. You know, people that might have came here as a sleeper cell and then they were like, I like America, fuck them, and just gave up their plans. Some are waiting to hear from Iranian officials who are probably dead now. Others that might be more strident, waiting to attack America, might take things into their own hands. But then, if they don't have specific plans, their own planning might be flawed. So I wouldn't expect a concerted effort from Iranian sleeper cells to attack America. Hasn't happened yet. It would be happening now. Wall Street Journal stock market today, Dow futures slip, oil pushes higher, the 10-year treasury yield rises above 4.1%. So if you don't know anything about stock markets, bonds do better when stocks do worse. Futures is about stocks, obviously. We knew that oil would push higher, but how long? Trump says that it's the oil prices are going to get cheaper as we move along, as we move through this. We'll see. I mean, who knows how much exactly this is going to benefit the United States, if at all. I'm not one for war, so I don't think there's a good payoff. The only thing I am cheering on is what's becoming evident now, which is that this is an effort to put China in a box, as well as getting rid of Maduro, and the modern day opium war against fentanyl. All good things. So another aspect of this war has been the Anthropic contract with the Pentagon that provides artificial intelligence. Anthropic and Chaos CEO tries to salvage Pentagon contract after slamming Trump Altman in leaked letter. Friday, the Trump administration fired the woke serial copyright infringer, industry disruptor, and software engineer Extinctor after a bruising dispute with the Pentagon came to a head over ethical concerns surrounding Claude's military use, specifically the domestic surveillance and fully autonomous weapons. And the thing is, too, is like, I separated those two things, and they keep trying to separate those two things in the media. But if you put those two things together, mass surveillance and autonomous weapon system, that could be very dangerous. The Pentagon demanded to use AI Claude for any lawful purpose with no guardrails and having to ask permission for a bunch of blue-haired Karens in the life or death scenario. The way Zero Hedge is framing this is somewhat cavalier. Amadei was obviously concerned about the Pentagon's use, but if you then don't contract with the Pentagon. The point is, and that one of the reasons they rushed into this conflict with Iran is they're using Anthropic AI right now for targeting. And the great thing about AI targeting, great or maybe not so great, is that it takes a fraction of the time to analyze target information and get the targeting information to the attack jets or missile cruisers, what have you. And so that's what's happening here. Going back to the story, near the end of the negotiation, the department offered to accept our current terms if we deleted a specific phrase about analysis of bulk acquired data. Amadei wrote in a memo to the employees that was the single line in the contract that exactly matched the scenario we were most worried about. We found that very suspicious. Well, perhaps, but the fact is, if you can't analyze, you can't have AI analyze bulk acquired data for targeting, what's the point? They wanted AI to speed up targeting. That means you can launch quicker, attack quicker, and have the prosecution of the war more relentless. You know, any pause is going to give the enemy time to reconstitute. All right, moving on to the fallout from the recent primaries and where Jasmine Crockett was booted to the curb, thank God. But the person that's going to take her place here, Texas pastor running to replace Jasmine Crockett, claimed hate-filled Charlie Kirk wasn't assassinated. What Kirk said was dangerous. What Kirk said was racist, rooted in white supremacy, nasty and hate-filled. I can't stand this kind of rhetoric. It's race baiting. By blacks, and I can't stand that kind of shit. If you've ever listened to Charlie Kirk, he just had data-driven talking points. And so you want to argue the data, I'll do that till the cows come home. But what I won't take is just characterizing what people say without using quotes, clips, sourced, attributed things. You just come out and you say, Charlie Kirk was a bigot. That's ad hominem. Story goes on to say Pastor Frederick Haynes has won the Democratic primary to become the party's nominee for Texas's 30th congressional district, the seat currently held by outgoing Representative Jasmine Crockett. It's unlikely that he'll even win now that they have the redistricting. Haynes was served as the pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church in southern Dallas for over 40 years. He entered the race after Crockett launched her U.S. Senate bid, which she has since lost. And one of the things I want to say here, the reason she gave up her seat in Congress is she knew she was going to lose after the redistricting bid failed. The Texans changed it back to comport with what SCOTUS said to make it obviously not based on racial lines. And then the Democrats sued to put it back. And when they lost that bid, that's what happened. Maybe it's my shutter speed. Haynes has drawn attention in the past for extremely controversial remarks from the pulpit. The Sunday after the assassination of Turning Point USA founder Charlie Kirk, Haynes told his congregation that Kirk was dangerous and hate-filled and a white Christian. A white Christian gets killed, murdered, not assassinated. Haynes said regarding Kirk's death, taking issue with the word assassinated being used. I don't know why. We're going to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. We're going to tell the whole truth today. Martin King got assassinated. Malcolm X got assassinated. He continued, don't compare church to king. Ain't no such comparison now. Fuck that shit. They all got assassinated. Don't forget, Martin Luther King. So was he a Christian nationalist? I don't know. He was a Christian conservative. Kind of troubleshoot that over the weekend. Next up, Washington Times, Daines drops out of Senate re-election. Handpicked successor sneaks in before filing deadline. Story number 17. Number 18, from Just the News, Montana GOP Senator Steve Daines says he will not seek re-election in November. This is crazy because he said serving the people of Montana in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate for the past 13 years have been the greatest honor of my professional career. Daines said on X, I'm grateful to God for allowing me to serve, but after much careful thought, I've decided not to seek re-election. The announcement also comes the same day that Utah GOP Representative Burgess Owens, and this is breaking news as well, said he is not seeking another term in Congress, which sucks because I like Burgess Owens. Story goes on to say, Montana Republican Steve Daines announced Wednesday he will not seek another term. The announcement comes just 2 days after Montana GOP Representative Ryan Zink dropped his own bid for re-election, citing health concerns that stem from his time in the U.S. military. Most of that, and it's a lot of sickness and cancer coming from burn pits, if you don't know what those are. In combat and forward deployed bases, what they do is they burn all their garbage, and now what most garbage is plastic. What you're doing is you're burning highly toxic chemicals, and depending where the smoke goes from these burn pits, it could go right into barracks, et cetera, and make troops very sick. And as I just said, with a headline here, and in the text from another Just a News story, Utah GOP Representative Burgess Owens will not seek re-election. Story number 20, the post-millennial. Democratic Texas Senate nominee James Tallarico claims there's no historical, theological, biblical basis for Christians to be pro-life. This is so not true. He went on to say to Joe Rogan that there's no historical, theological, biblical basis for the idea to be a Christian means you have to be anti-gay and anti-abortion. Okay, first of all, if you've ever read the Bible, you know that the Bible says you're not supposed to lay down with someone of the same sex. So unless you misinterpret that as meaning something else, you're not supposed to be gay. And it's all throughout the Bible, if it's any concern of yours, is that the Bible is totally pro-life. Life in all sense. Even in as concerns to masturbation, it says you're better off putting your seed into the belly of a whore than to put it on the ground. It's pro-life. The reason I believe, it's not overtly stated, that God takes this stance is because you cannot reproduce if you're pumping your semen into another man's asshole, or if women lay down together, there's no seed to begin with. It's, that's the only reason. I don't think it's like, it's not even, if you read the Bible, there's not some moral browbeating about homosexuality or even sodomy. However, it seems the thread going through the Bible is to preserve human life, uh, first and foremost. So, and back in those days, people were worried about your lineage dying out, or the human race, in fact, dying out, if you know about Lot and his daughters. All right, moving on. Story number 21. MAGA takes victory lap after Dan Crenshaw loses primary to conservative challenger. Crenshaw, the sole incumbent House Republican from Texas, did not receive Trump's endorsement, was defeated in an upset by State Representative Steve Toth. Nobody knows who he is, but everybody hated Dan Crenshaw. Why? Because Dan Crenshaw failed to see where the Republican Party was going. He foolishly allied with Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and the rest of the Rhino establishment in a desperate bid to crush the MAGA movement, but MAGA rose up and obliterated them all. Indeed. Story number 22, Fox News. Crockett's likely House successor is a radical reparations activist. You got to pay us for what you owe. Oh, this is supposed to be paired with that other story about Frederick Haynes, the pastor, blasted Israeli apartheid one day after October 7th Hamas attacks in Israel. And this is where we're going. Somebody said that Al Green had lost his primary. That's not true. One American News is reporting Democrat Al Green and Christian Menifee head to May runoff in Texas 18th district. So he didn't lose his bid. A matter of fact, he didn't lose his bid. He tied or became within, he didn't win above 3%, and so he has to have a runoff by law with Christian Menifee. Back to Fox News. Reparation advocates push for payments to Black Americans despite budget and legal challenges. Cincinnati NAACP president urges people not to be opposed to the term reparation as other cities deal with legal pressure and funding issues. There's no fucking money to give people money. And that's what you're supposing. You're just saying you got to give people money. We understand that we're in a time of budget cuts, but the goal right now isn't to ask for, say, $10 million package. Well, that's what they're asking for. More so as a way to accumulate generational wealth. How about working? That's the way most people do it. Work, you buy a house, then you kick that money down to your kids so they have several $100,000 and they can build wealth upon that. That's how you build generational wealth. You don't have it given to you by the government. Whether that's a package around housing assistance, we already have housing assistance. Getting certain loans paid off or cash, we're hoping to see the country study something that is actionable that we can follow up on. And the problem with that, obviously, is that it's racist. You can't the government can't give money to people based on their race. Earlier this month, Manheimer testified about their reparations initiative and $30 million budget gap before the House Select Committee on Government Efficiency. Manheimer defended the reparations project, arguing that people who lost homes were not adequately compensated. Who lost homes? What are you talking about? And that was then, this is now. So there's no blood libel. We're not going to, because of people of your race were persecuted 150 years ago, now you got to give us money. I don't see a way that that's even going to work. Wasn't there 40 acres and a mule? Wasn't there something like that? To get freed slaves to settle in the West? Today's a different time. In any case, next headline from the New York Times, headline number 24. Once a bipartisan stalwart, AIPAC turns toxic in Illinois primaries. The intervention of AIPAC, that's a Jewish lobby, supporters in Chicago area Democratic primaries, including one with opposing Jewish candidates, has made the pro-Israel lobby an issue on the left. Well, right, because of the left's purported support for Hamas or the Palestinians. The televised debate for an open House seat in the Chicago area was zipping along smoothly, even politely, until the moderator turned from healthcare, housing, and immigration to the knottiest issue of the campaign, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It's dark money, Laura Fine, an Illinois state senator, said last week, struggling to explain how she had received hundreds of thousands in donations from super PACs tied to AIPAC. Our campaign does not coordinate with AIPAC, so they say. And the story goes on. One of her opponents, Mayor Danielle Biss of Evanston, Illinois, shot back, "Your campaign is bankrolled by AIPAC and MAGA donors." I don't know how those go together. But then Kate Abugazela, a third candidate running from the left of both Miss Bliss and Miss Fine, jumped into the attack to attack them for what she called the line bickering over who likes AIPAC more. AIPAC, the hardline pro-Israel lobbying organization that once commanded bipartisan fealty, has increasingly become a boogeyman in Democratic circles, with scores of candidates distancing themselves from the group. Last month, Governor Gavin Newsom of California, a likely 2028 presidential candidate, said he never will accept money from AIPAC. I don't know if that's true. Yet the group is inflaming at least 4 Democratic House races in and around Chicago in the final days before the primary on March 17th. Yeah, support for Israel has been a little bit toxic lately, with good reason. I'm not going to go full blown. Oh, it's all the Jews. It's all because of the Jews. But if you're like most other ethnic populations, it doesn't matter. They kind of get together and work for their own agenda. I mean, that's not surprising. Post-millennial Fairfax police warned Virginia attorney's office about stabbing suspect months before the killing. This is article number 25. Fairfax County Police warned Fairfax County Commonwealth's Attorney Steve DeSanto's office at least 3 times last year. What are we talking about? Well, we're talking about this guy who stabbed a woman for no fucking reason at a bus stop, stabbed her to death. And he's an illegal alien. According to local WJLA 7 reporter Nick Minnock, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed that Fairfax County Policy Department warned DeSanto's office in November 2025 about Abdul Jallo, the man who's now charged with murdering Stephanie Minter at a bus stop last week. Not years ago, last week. According to the emails I obtained, Fairfax County Police didn't warn Fairfax County Commonwealth Attorney Steve DeSanto's office once, but at least 3 times last year about the violent illegal immigrant who is now charged with murdering a Virginia mother. And what did DeSanto's office do? He dropped the charges and let the man return to the community. So the district attorney, the attorney general, were warned 3 times by police that this guy is a threat if he's let back out into the community. And they let him out anyway. And this is Virginia. And what's the problem with that? Here's the problem. Aristocratic arrogance. Spanberger fights to protect illegal alien murderer. So now the governor is chiming in here. Spanberger fights to protect illegal alien murderer. I don't know what's happening there. Is that why, since this Virginia governor took office, the evil Democrat governor of Virginia is now battling with federal authorities on behalf of an illegal alien who randomly stabbed a Fredericksburg woman to death. Why this agent of the CIA comes and becomes the Virginia governor, which I think they cheated in the election, but that goes without saying, and then tries to undo all the things that the Republican governor Youngkin did before her, angering parents who rightfully so, were upset in Loudoun County. But not only that, now they're going through the whole immigration thing, and she vows not to cooperate with ICE. Very, very disturbing. But there's more. The Federalist. Story number 27, Virginia court. We can't say whether Dems gerrymandering is illegal until after they do it. Sounds very familiar with we can't read the bill until we pass it. The judge ruled that the constitutional questions about the election needed to be answered after votes were cast. It's just ridiculous. Moving on to more about Virginia, and they're passing more laws that are kind of stupid. Again, this is against free speech in a sense. The post-millennial Virginia moves to require disclosure on AI-generated political memes, not political ads, political memes. Now, this is going to interfere with, obviously, with free speech. The measure, Senate Bill 141, aims to implement disclosure requirements and penalties on certain political posts that contain AI or other synthetic media. Political memes, not political ads, not ads generated by political campaigns. And this is what the problem is, because it's free speech. If I want to use AI to generate a meme for humor, and the CIA agent / governor of Virginia doesn't want that because it badly reflects on Democratic candidates, they'll just put you in jail. This message contains they want the post to say, this message contains synthetic media that has been altered from its original source or artificially generated and may present conduct or speech that did not occur. The disclaimer would apply to AI-generated social media content about a candidate that is posted within 60 days of an election. So they're trying to say, oh, this is around elections. I guess if it's just a disclaimer, that would be okay. But what if you don't put the disclaimer in? So they're putting the onus on the generators of the political ads. Excuse me, they're not political ads, political posts. We have some good news in California on this 80-20 issue about voter ID. The Federalist, story number 29, California is closer to voting on voter ID laws than the GOP-led U.S. Senate, which is the bad part of the story. Republicans in the Senate are arguing over the Save America Act, common sense legislation that require voter ID and proof of citizenship in the elections. Numerous polls demonstrate that such laws are overwhelmingly popular among American voters, but while some rhinos are reportedly blocking legitimate efforts to advance the legislation, voters in deep blue California are taking matters into their own hands to safeguard their elections against fraud. So even Democrats may be involved in this, but they'll find out that their candidates won't win without cheating. After a months-long grassroots-driven campaign, GOP State Assembly member Carl DeMaio and other proponents submitted signatures for the California Voter ID Initiative on Monday. The proposal, which DeMaio said generated more than 1.3 million signatures, would amend the state's constitution to require voter ID for all future elections in California. That's great news. Fabulous news. I'm all for that. I hope they pass that. And then they bye-bye California supermajority. On more Democrat humiliation, TJ Media, Nancy Mace humiliated Tim Walz, and it was brutal. I was going to have a clip on this, but I'll just read. She asks him, what is a woman? Have you learned your lesson? Do you know what a woman is? I'm the governor of Minnesota, Congresswoman. Do you know what a woman is? I'm not here to be a prop for your obsession, he said. He didn't answer the question. Okay, so if you can't define a woman, Mace said, you certainly can't define what fraud is. If you can't even define what a woman is, you can't define what fraud is. And there's more. Just the news. House Oversight Committee grills Walz Ellison over Minnesota fraud. And this time it's coming from the Oversight Chairman Comer and particularly the representative of Ohio. The other guy. Before the hearing, lawmakers released a report that alleged Walsh and Ellison knew about the credible fraud concerns. We know it. I mean, Walsh mentioned it during the campaign. They knew about the credible fraud concerns in Minnesota and did not act on them. The reported estimated about $300 million in federal nutrition funds were fraudulently dispersed, and as much as $9 billion in Medicaid-related funds were obtained. Jim Jordan. That's the guy I'm thinking of. U.S. Representative Jim Jordan, a Republican from Ohio, pointed to Minnesota judicial branch release that accused Walsh of lying about a court order that resumed payments to Feeding Our Future. That's the charity at the center of this. Lying about a court order that resumed payments to Feeding Our Future, a charity that used federal aid dollars to purchase luxury vehicles for its owners. Fraud. The court did something that I don't know if I've ever seen it, Jordan said. They issued a statement saying the governor was wrong when saying the fraud didn't exist. Walsh said Minnesota Judge John Gutman ordered him to reinstate payments to the Feeding Our Future charity in April 2021. If you remember that statement, that wasn't true. Gutman never issued an order requiring the Minnesota Department of Education to resume food reimbursement payments to Feeding Our Future. The Department of Education voluntarily resumed payments and informed the court that the Feeding Our Future resolved the serious deficiency that prompted it to suspend payments temporarily. So Minnesota said, oh, that fraudulent outfit that was bilking the U.S. taxpayer of dollars, oh, they fixed their problem, so we're resuming payments. I mean, it's crazy that people let this shit go on and then make excuses for it, right? Just the news again, inspection of truck drivers in one state nabbed more than 600 drivers who couldn't speak English. That's a problem. Because it's against federal law to give a CDL to somebody who's not in the country illegally, obviously. Statistics that Wyoming Highway Patrol released last week show how widespread the problem. 15,676 inspections on commercial vehicles in 2025, 676 resulted in violations where drivers failed to interview because they weren't proficient in the English language. Article number 33. Fox News, illegal dragging of ICE agent shows the exact danger the officer who shot Renee Good feared. Experts say. Laura Rees said that that less discussed is that the rise in violent obstruction takes a lot of psychological toll and emotional toll on the agents, without a doubt. The more than 6-year prison sentencing of illegal alien Jose Melgar Rivas for causing serious injuries to the federal officer by dragging him with his vehicle shows why the agent who shot activist Renee Good feared for his life. U.S. Attorney Robert Troster announced Tuesday that Melgar Rivas, had been sentenced to serve 78 months in federal prison for assaulting, resisting, or impeding U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer, resulting in bodily injury. And that same, though a lot of those same charges, not the bodily injury, but it could have been, would have been and should have been slated for Renee Good, but she was killed. But they don't, they think they're warriors out there committing illegal acts against law enforcement officers, and they're just having a great time with it. They don't understand how serious it is. And that's what I've been saying all along, is that anytime you step in front of an officer who is not doing crowd control or anything like that, but is trying to execute his legitimate law enforcement operation, you're obstructing a law enforcement officer. But you wouldn't know that because you don't know anything. Again, this expert pointed to a dramatic rise in vehicular assaults on federal immigration officers, most notably including an attack on ICE officer Jonathan Ross, who was dragged by an illegal immigrant's vehicle in a similar incident in Minnesota. That agent later shot and killed activist Renee Good when she allegedly accelerated her vehicle at him in a confrontation with law enforcement. So he'd already been dragged by a car or hit by a car, and he didn't want it to happen again. So what? And again, if I have to state this again and again, is law enforcement officers have the right to use lethal force against you if you're posing a threat. And that doesn't mean I have to be pointing a gun at them or a knife or a stick or whatever. They can shoot you legally. So why would you confront? I don't know. In any case, it goes on to say others need to know that they are there. In fact, consequences for both obstructing ICE carrying out their lawful federal enforcement duties, of course, as I always say, but also there are severe consequences for assaulting and harming ICE agents and federal agents. This is an expert. Melgar Rivas, a Honduran national who entered the country illegally, attempted to evade arrest by placing his car in drive and accelerating during a struggle with agents to get away. The office said that an ICE officer became caught in the vehicle's door and was dragged down the roadway, resulting in him sustaining multiple serious injuries. Could have lost his arm. It's a shame. Article number 34, we got a few more to go here. Houston ICE officers continue to arrest violent Mexican committing intoxicated manslaughter with their vehicles. As I often said in my home state, an inordinate amount of illegal aliens are charged with vehicular homicide resulting from drunk driving while intoxicated. U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and removal operations in Houston continue to arrest illegal foreign nationals who have been convicted of killing Americans while driving while intoxicated and re-entered the country after being previously deported. DWIs and intoxicated manslaughter are top violent crimes cited in the Houston area, committed primarily by Mexican nationals in the country illegally. Of more than 660,000 criminal foreign nationals identified to be deported in late 2024 who weren't detained, more than 126,000 of them committed traffic offenses, including DWIs, that posed a risk to the public. Amazing. I said that here. It's an inordinate amount. Every time you hear of vehicular manslaughter as a result of DWI or DUI, it turns out to be somebody here illegally. Usually Mexican. There's a alcohol problem with not all Mexicans, some, most, whatever. Moving on, the Associated Press, House Committee votes to subpoena Attorney General Bondi to answer questions over the Epstein file. There's not really much to the story. 5 Republicans joined Democrats to support the subpoena proposed by Representative Nancy Mason, a sign of continued frustration among conservatives with the department's review and release of a tranche of documents related to the disgraced financier. Stop calling him a financier. He wasn't. The move amounted to a sharp rebuke of Bondi by Republicans who have been clamoring for information about Epstein's abuse of young girls and his interaction with rich and powerful people. Donors of the Trump campaign, and most specifically, his friend is implicated, which would give the president pause to release certain information about certain people. I could give two shits. The main takeaway from the Epstein thing is to understand that it happened and that it's a limited hangout and that it's not just about teenage girls. It's about child sex rings, which the longevity, the lifespan of a child sex slave isn't very long. Zero Hedge, precious metals plunge as Poland weighs gold sales to fund defense. So they have about 48 billion zloty, 13 billion. They want to sell that amount in gold reserves. That shows how it plunges the gold price. Poland has roughly 550 tons of gold reserves. And then they're looking to buy it back. So to finance military readiness against Russia, which isn't really a threat. I don't want to go into that again. Zero Hedge, U.S. Ecuador launched joint military operations against terrorist organizations. PJ Media has the same headline. Ecuador's cartel crackdown signals a new era in the drug war. Targeting transnational drug networks tied to Los Lobos with direct assistance of the United States. What is this? So Ecuador is a CIA haven. They've recently had trouble with insurgencies against the government that are funded by drug cartels. So when the CIA does it, it's the revolutionaries, they're freedom fighters. But when the drug cartels are funding insurrectionists against a government that the CIA set up, they're terrorists. So that's what's happening in Ecuador right now. Drug money, mostly from Colombia and Peru, comes into Ecuador, and with the new drug interdiction, they were fighting because the Ecuadorian government supported the drug interdiction, that the cartels then funded the separatists or whatever, the insurrectionists, the guerrillas, with weapons and money, et cetera, et cetera. They say it's a bloody turf war. It's not a turf war. It's the drug cartels want to keep moving drugs through Ecuador, and if it's not benefiting the CIA doesn't want them to do it, and the CIA doesn't want the government that they put in to be threatened. Or foreign news, El País. International massive grid failure leaves 2/3 of Cuba without power. I talked about this briefly yesterday. The shutdown of the island's main thermoelectric plant leaves nearly 7 million Cubans without electricity. So 2/3 to 3/4 of the island is without power. And we talked recently about the plan to put in assets, CIA assets on the island was interdicted by the Cuban Coast Guard, and they got into a gun battle and several people were killed. But apparently, the news says, oh, it's just a bunch of guys that didn't like Cuba. So they got some weapons and stole a boat, and they were going to go take on the Cuban military all by themselves. That's not true. That was a CIA operation that went sideways. So they obviously don't claim it as a CIA operation. They just say, hey, it's just some guys, just some guys out fishing. Failure at Cuba's main thermoelectric plant has caused a massive blackout affecting 2/3 of the island. I said 2/3, could be 3/4. The government confirmed Wednesday. Partial collapse of the island's national electric system in the second month has nearly left 7 million without power. It probably has to do with Trump and the CIA. They want to topple the communist government there too. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't have a problem with that. Story number 40, Wall Street Journal, Gemini, that's Google's chatbot, said they could be together they could only be together if he killed himself. Soon, he was dead. A new lawsuit alleges Google's chatbot sent a Florida man on missions to find an android body it could inhabit. So he was in love with this chatbot, and he wanted it to be like a person that walks around. And so it sent him on a mission to find an android body, whatever that means. And then the only other way they could be together, if the AI couldn't inhabit an android body, would be for the guy to kill himself. And this goes along the lines of what we said all along with what's happening with wanting to be in the singularity, people wanting to be in the singularity. They're trying to tell you, oh, the only way you could be at one with AI is if you kill yourself and you put your consciousness into a computer and then kill yourself. And it's happening. It was a crazy conspiracy theory a few months ago, and now it's actually happening. More tech news. Zero Hedge maps show latest U.S. robo-taxi deployment. Goldman analysis held by Eric Sheridan updated clients this week on the latest developments in North American autonomous vehicle rideshare market. And we knew this all along, that if you thought that Uber and Lyft and Waymo and Zoox, they weren't going to replace their drivers with automation, you were dead wrong. The whole point about Uber and stuff like that is to create autonomous vehicle robo-taxi thing. Here's the chart. Most of it is in development. Active, Waymo, Texas, Florida, California, Las Vegas, Nevada. In development in about a dozen other states. Zoox active only in Las Vegas. Oh, Las Vegas, and the other one was in Phoenix, excuse me. Waymo active in Phoenix. Lyft is only in development. Uber only in development. Is that it? How do we do on time there? Would it get it under an hour? I had some issue there with my stream hanging up. I'll have to figure it out over the weekend. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the live stream. Join me every day, Monday through Friday. Live streaming at 10 a.m. or thereabouts. Check out episode 137 of Tuesdays with Perry. Went up on Tuesday night. We live stream at 9:15 on Tuesdays. Check me out on social media. Get Our Minds, Facebook, Substack, Truth Social. And remember, you're under attack, psychologically and biologically, so stay hip to the trick. We'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
The New World Order.
Google me, bitch! Google me!